Well, hello everyone. I think we're live and working. I always start out every show with this doubt, this nagging doubt that I've messed up something technical. It comes from being traumatized during my early days of live streaming. That's why you get a nice little view of my messy desktop there, and you get to catch me loading in. But here we are, folks, another episode of Coffee, Kegs, and Kriegsspiel. I got my coffee going, which you can't see because my camera's off. Let's turn that on just to say hello to everyone. Hello and howdy. And we had a really cool game yesterday. We used the K22 system for it, and it went really, really, really well. There were a lot of really cool lessons that we learned, and so I am going to talk about this with some of you or with all of you, uh, as if you're not all watching, right? And well, let's just get into it, right? I'm not one for big, long intros. Let's get right into it. We use the K22 system, which is a system that I wrote and published, and I have offered for sale. It now has a page on Board Game Geek. It's a pretty cool system. Most of the issues with it seem to be pretty well ironed out. I am probably going to tweak one or two rules in particular with regards to the artillery and how the artillery is resolved. But for the most part, everything seems to work really nicely, and I'm pretty pleased with the game. The results were rational and reasonable. We had another player who did my Pickett's Charge scenario. If you guys saw when I did Pickett's Charge earlier this month on the anniversary, I kind of ran a simulation and it kind of worked. And then I had another player, he ran it on his own and said it worked pretty well. So I don't know if he made a few adjustments, he may have. I also know that K22 has already been modified for the American Civil War. There is a player, his name is Blaze Trail. He showed me his system. Very elegant redevelopment of the system. I really do think in many ways it improves upon the work that I have done. Not comprehensively, of course, but it really, really worked really well. So I really liked seeing how that ran. It is, of course, at a higher scale, so it doesn't conflict directly with K22, which again, you're dealing with battalions, you're dealing with half battalion units, batteries, whereas at the next higher level, you're dealing with brigades and divisions, which is where a lot of people seem to be attracted. They seem to like to play at that other level. I wanted to develop a system that's closer to original Kriegsspiel, and therefore K22 exists. It's sort of like original Kriegsspiel, but reimagined to make it playable between a small group of people in their den, garage, man cave, gaming place, wherever you go. In the course of 2 to 3 or 4 hours tops, you can get one of these games played and scratch that Kriegsspiel itch pretty simply with just a few people. Good morning to Achilles, who is here. Achilles helped me to umpire this game. I was kind of hoping he'd pop on into the chat or the room, but it looks like he's going to view. But he is welcome to do so. And I'm going to kind of give you a quick recap of the game, and then we'll talk about the lessons. All right, so let's get my drawing pin here, and we'll start with blue. And the way the scenario was set up, and again, here we are using my favorite map from the Mets map. It's my favorite quarter of the Mets map. I absolutely love this map. You got the flat terrain here, you have even lower terrain here, you've got these dominating hills here, you've got this area here where people can kind of get lost a little bit. And then you have the Moselle River, which is this wonderful barrier with just a number of strategic crossings. There's no crossing here in the middle, which forces commanders to make early decisions. Am I going to go north or am I going to go south? Then you have the heights here, which are great for artillery right here and for observation. It's just a cool map. It really, really is. And then, of course, you have just the edge of the city over here. So you kind of get everything you want on a map, and it's all in these, 12 panels or whatever we've got here, 16 panels, or I can't count. It's 5 times 5. That's 25. All right. Anyway, let's talk about the scenario. We positioned blue here on St. Blaise. I know, classic cliche, right? But the force was small. The force was small. So I'll just drop a few blocks there if I can do it without scribbling on the map. We had a small force here I think they had a battery up there, and a battery is 2 blocks. Just keep that in mind. In K22, a battery is 2 blocks. 1 block is a half battery. And we're just going to drop these. I think he had one more infantry block up there. And we'll go ahead and give him that. And that was kind of what was occupying those heights. Then we had reinforcements coming in from right here and over here at St. Privat. And so these guys had to get into the action somehow and relieve this garrison which is holding the hill. And this was the expected plan. That they would get up here, they would fight for this hill, they would hold it. Really, what we wanted to see, the solution to this scenario, was that Red, who is starting here with a moderately sized force, and has reinforcements here, and has reinforcements coming from here, what was expected is that Red would rush the hill. And that's because Red knows that Blue has a garrison up there. They have reinforcements close at hand, maybe a 30-minute march at most, less than probably. And they can organize a mountain attack straight up this hill and capture the hill before Blue arrives. Then you would have Red reinforcements arriving at the same time, and you would then have a nice fight for Blue, with Blue and Red fighting over the hill as kind of this final climactic clash. So that was how we designed this scenario. And I want to welcome Vindictus. Vindictus was one of the players. He's popped into the room. I don't know if he's on the chat, but Vindictus, oh, you guys are here and you're in the audience. Let's go ahead and bring you in. Let's bring you in. How do we do this? Invite to speak. There we go. I'll bring you guys on, and you can share some of your thoughts. But this was the general scenario, the general plan. And Red basically had to recognize we've got to rush this hill and get up it quickly. But Red took a mostly artillery force with just a couple infantry units. So they took a smaller force than I expected. They didn't take an assault force. They took sort of a force that was going to prepare the position by bombarding it. And then they waited for their reinforcements to arrive, which gave Blue the opportunity. Actually, they had 2 batteries here, which gave Blue the opportunity to bring up their forces. But Blue also was kind of concerned about some things. Vindictus, who was the side commander, actually had, I think, 5 or 6. He had 5 cuirassiers who came up over here through or around the woods. I think he went around them because going through the woods is not something you typically do with cavalry, and coming along the road he would have had to come single file. Red had a fair bit of forces here coming up through here. We're just going to drop blocks here. And they had a pretty good sized force. I'm just going to again drop a bunch of blocks here to represent what each side had. And let's just copy. Let's give them some artillery because I know they had some artillery too. Actually, these guys only had a gun section, which technically under K22 rules you can't do that. You have to buy a whole battery. I didn't quite catch that. I thought that was odd yesterday, seeing that in the formation, and now that I think about it, that was an illegal as per the rules purchase. But whatever, it's okay kind of when things like that happen, and especially in Kriegsspiel, because it's about having things that are not quite under your control, things that are unpredictable. It's okay to have stuff kind of in the stochastic range of variability where even the umpire is sometimes a little surprised. That's okay. Not a big deal to me. We allow players to choose their own units. We don't assign their order of battle, and the reason we do that is it creates a more organic experience. It creates asymmetry on the battlefield where one side is going to have their own preferred mix of units versus the other side. And the other side might have said, we're going to take more troops. And one side might say, we're going to take more elites, more elite forces. Or one side might say, we're going to favor cavalry or artillery or something. And that really creates a pretty cool mix up on the battlefield. You don't get these boring force on force fights where both sides are even. You get these really cool engagements where the two sides are naturally varied. Achilles, you're here. I want to acknowledge and say hi. How's it going?
Good morning, sir. It is very rare to find a Sunday morning show where somebody uses the word stochastic.
Right? Yeah, that means just so people know what it means. It means that there is a range of possibilities, and something can fall
Mhm.
in that range of possibilities. So, like between 1 and 10, that's a stochastic range, and you know that that variable is going to land between 1 and 10. It's not going to be 20. It's not going to be on the negative scale. It's going to just be between 1 and 10. But yes, there you go. Good morning. Oh
Good
man.
morning.
So Achilles, you helped me to umpire this.
Hmm.
Overall, I guess, do you have any particular thoughts? Like, let's start with the scenario. I just described the scenario to everyone, which you probably heard. Um, what do you think was the solution to? Do you think that my proposed solution that Red needed to rush the hill and then bring up their reinforcements and hold it against the blue counterattack? Do you think that was the right thing, or do you think Red's waiting to assault the hill until all their forces were up was the better choice? What are your thoughts on that? And you're trained military, so you kind of have more insight about this than I do.
Well, result-wise, you can't really argue with it because they succeeded.
Right.
But they also succeeded in part, because they were extremely fortunate with their attack, especially on the left. Um, the god of war basically favored them in the dice rolls
Yeah. Yeah.
on that side, so they just as easily could have gone the other direction. That plus the battery running out of ammunition when it did, um, really hurt blue over
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. That
Uh,
battery had been firing a long time.
yeah, exactly, and so they they left more to chance by doing it the way they did than uh, if they had gone early. So yeah, I agree. I agree that if you just kind of set the final result aside, probably the better move would have been an earlier assault, especially on the far left. If on the far left, if that had been pushed faster,
Yeah.
especially because he went into line formation, slowed everything down. Um, and you can understand the pressure to do so because he is close to the enemy. He knows he's close to the enemy, and he wants to be in a formation that's prepared to fight. But he was still far enough away where could have he could have stayed in a more march friendly formation and moved faster. And he wasn't aware. Of course, that's part of the aspect of it, right? The fog of war. He wasn't aware that there wasn't more out there. He didn't know what was in front of him.
Yeah.
But yes, if he's pushing aggressively there and he stays in march formation, maybe another turn, gets past that creek,
Yeah.
and then
Right
goes
here.
into line, yeah, then he didn't know it, but he's facing basically a couple of disrupted infantry units, and there's nothing. That flank was in the air, which
That.
was exactly what they were looking for. That was the situation they were trying to find, and
Mm,
that flank was in the air at that point.
yeah. Exactly. And to illustrate for the audience, we had this player here, and he came in line formation. He deployed for battle. Oh, look, I've got exchange blocks here. But he deployed for battle here and then moved across open country in line formation, which means you move really, really slow. You only move 1 or 200 paces per turn per 5 minutes in that formation. What Achilles is saying is, had he remained in column, because there, even though he didn't know what was in front of him, there clearly was no threat to his immediate front. Had he remained in column and moved a little faster, he could have got up to here, saw the enemy, changed into line, and then smashed into them, and he would have carried the position pretty easily.
Hmm.
But instead, yeah, he deployed into line too soon, and the timing was thrown off by that. I want to say hello to Vindictus,
Hey,
who,
good morning.
good morning. You were the cavalry commander commanding a big bunch of cuirassiers. Well, first of all, why did you choose a bunch of cuirassiers? I think it was an effective choice. But I want to know what was your logic behind that choice? Why not hussars or dragoons or lancers? Why cuirassiers?
I was actually selected to be the overall commander,
Hmm.
and I was told to also pick a unit. And I'm a heavy French heavy cavalry guy by my nature. That's my favorite type of unit, and that's why I picked them. I looked at the map and I noticed there was some open areas over here by Castle Grosveux, and I was in fear of a flank attack there. And I figured, you know what? Maybe do something unexpected since I like heavy cavalry and we have all this infantry. That's what I'm going to use.
Hmm. Well, that was an interesting choice. And I find it interesting because your objective is, you got to hold the top of this hill. You've got woods all around. It just doesn't seem like cavalry friendly terrain is where the action is likely to be. Nonetheless, you did get into action, including on top of the hill. And I think you did more to damage the red team than just about anyone else. Your artillery did well, but I really do think your cuirassiers were the most effective units on the battlefield that day. You routed for a time the batteries. They had two batteries that were firing on you, 12 pounders from over here. Um, these guys had been sent. They had been reassigned over here, and they were disrupted in these vineyards. They were caught up. And by the way, we know these are vineyards because they're on the sides of the hills. They're not on open, flat terrain where you'd put a farm. I forgot about that, and I was like, how did we know these were vineyards? They're on the sides of the hills, which is typical for vineyards for some reason. And I live around them, but I don't know why they do that. But anyway, I digress. Yeah, you sent two cavalry blocks here, and they just smashed that artillery. That must have been fun. What did you think when you saw that? When you got
Well,
that report?
ever since the first game I played with this group, in which ironically I was in charge of heavy cavalry, and was able to make the final glorious charge to win the game, I kind of got addicted to that feeling being the heavy cavalry man in me. And I noticed the vineyards here right after my cuirassiers had deployed along this edge of the wood. And I said, hey, there's a nice little space here between the vineyards. Nobody will ever expect me to come thundering down there. And that was because I was told about the artillery here. And
Yeah.
in fact, when I first looked, I thought they were in column, and I said, "That's it, we're taking them." And yes, I was very excited, very happy to see them. It was a fruit that was ripe to be plucked. And I sent two squadrons because I was expecting the rest of our infantry to come up here, and I wanted to support them with an attack on Fay. But they did not arrive until much later. So I only committed two squadrons. And because I was told that one of these batteries was about to fire a canister, the order was to feint with this first squadron and attack with the second, and it seemed to work out very well.
It did work out very, very well. Even though they did take some fire from the artillery before they were able to close, they managed to press home the attack. And again, they basically captured these two batteries. They couldn't keep them, but they basically destroyed them. And then these other two, the men abandoned the guns and eventually returned when it was safe. but none of these batteries, I don't think, ever returned to action. So you basically removed these guys from play, which again was a brilliant use of your cuirassiers. And then up here, of course, you also delivered an attack, and it was actually over here on the flank. And there were 2 red units here that you hit. Now, here is again another situation where you should have just had your hat handed to you, and instead, these were elites who formed square on an emergency basis, but they managed to form square, and you broke them. You broke this unit entirely. You shattered the one on the left, and then the other one did break your first cuirassier charge, but because that charge was immediately followed by a second wave, the second wave got through and hit the block pretty hard. And again, rendered both of these units, both elite units, combat ineffective for the remainder of the battle. Didn't destroy them, didn't capture them, but again, they were no longer in service, which meant that when the main attack hit, as it did just a few minutes later, that attack was blunted. And that was just about the best you could do. Now, through dumb luck, I think, Red still managed to push back these units. They had to fall back, or they did fall back, which was a surprise, I think, to everyone on the Empire team to see that. But they did have reinforcements. There were blue reinforcements back here, but they did not seem to have a coherent defense. They had just arrived, as I recall. They had arrived recently, and they were kind of milling about and trying to get themselves sorted out. It was probably the order delay thing that we had going on, and that cost them. They ended up falling back. And once they had that, then there wasn't much to defend the hill, and Red was able to carry the position. And then, of course, we had the other fight down here, where Red came in with their other units, and I think it was 4 or 5 units, and Blue was here. You had your infantry up finally. One of those blocks was actually a Jaeger block, but they had them in line formation, which is not really the appropriate use of Jaegers. They had them at the center. They should be deployed and skirmishing and shooting targets of opportunity. Where's the Jaeger block? We'll just put it in here. And let's see here. We'll put it right there. And there you go. And Red defeated that. And that was a pretty fair fight. It was pretty close. Red rolled the advantage die. They did have a +1 because they had artillery support. They also had their own skirmishers embedded, which I think canceled out some of the Blues' advantages. And again, they didn't crush Red or Blue, but they did push them back. And that was kind of where the battle ended. So we were absolutely pretty happy with this scenario and how it unfolded. Vindictus, I want to ask you, did you learn any lessons from this experience at all?
Yes, 2 big lessons. The first was to always remember that you risk, having your horses spent after a gallant charge.
Mm-hmm.
So after my 2 attacks, my men and their horses could no longer do anything except go back and relax at the castle because all the horses were blown. The second biggest lesson was to pay attention to the turn, how long each turn is. And I didn't realize consciously, I realized it subconsciously, but I did not realize it consciously, I guess due to all the excitement, that, the turns were much shorter, shorter time increments, and as well as the delay in the messages. I heard it mentioned several times, but for some reason in the excitement of the battle, it became out of sight, out of mind for me. And as a result, my initial orders to the 2nd Infantry Brigade here to meet me at the castle turned into me arriving at the castle with my cuirassiers saying, "Where's the infantry?" and then sending a message informing them I'm moving forward of the woods, meet up with me there, to what happened to them. And that was the two biggest lessons. But more of the two, the message delays really affected me because I was not as
Mm.
cognizant of them as I should and kept sending off flurries of
Mm-hmm.
messages and not realizing until later, wait a minute, there's a delay and I'm probably making matters worse.
Yeah, yeah. And take a look at some comments here in the YouTube. We've got a really busy YouTube. We've got some of our Legends of Kriegsspiel here. We've got Jan, who is talking about assault columns. And yeah, it looks like Theo didn't quite know. I've actually invited him to speak. He's in the audience. If he knows how to accept that, he can come and speak for himself. But it seems like Theo's experience is mostly American Civil War, so he is a little unfamiliar with the use of assault columns and such. Um, that's okay though. He will know better for next time, and next time he will be that much more effective in battle. As Jan just points out here, he says, "Next time you know." Um, Theo, in his words, says, "I think my American Civil War thinking prevented me from forming Napoleonic assault columns." Otto says, "This makes me want to host another Open Saturday, and I hope you do, Otto, because I would like to play. It's going to be a while before I umpire again, so I hope you do." Carter says, "Something, something, something, entire war fought with militia America." Okay, Carter, thanks for the help. Um, let's see here. Carter says, "Certainly, at least they are used differently." You're speaking about cavalry here. There are different types with higher melee value. Personally, I wouldn't have allowed that cuirassier charge on top of the hill, though. Yeah, they were actually charging downhill, and it was one of these things where we were watching that, but we did decide to go ahead and allow it. It was downhill, and so we figured, it'll work. But you're right, Jan. This terrain is not cavalry friendly, and we do have to think about that as umpires if we're even going to let cavalry really operate up here, especially heavy cavalry. But again, we allowed it, and it was fun, and it produced a really cool result. So it was cool no matter what. Um, and then he says, but that's umpire judgment. He just said that. I just said that. There's his next comment. Very good. Otto says, "Do you prefer 5-minute turns over 15-minute turns? From my experience, games using 5-minute turns tend to use up more of the game time for maneuvering, which isn't always a good thing in my opinion." So K22, again, original Kriegsspiel moves in 2-minute increments. I figured 5 minutes was kind of a good compromise. And when you're playing at this lower level where you have a guy, he's commanding maybe 2 battalions, he's commanding just 1 brigade. Um, Letting him make more decisions, I think, suits the scenario. The trick to pulling it off, though, is scenario design. I know that yesterday you guys were concerned that the force coming from St. Privat was not going to arrive in time to participate in the battle because it's got to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 turns before it gets in. I don't remember how long the game was. I think it was like 20 something turns, which is really cool. And we were moving really fast because we had a really strong player to umpire ratio. But I do think the criticism is correct that if I start units too far away from the battle, and then the battle starts and we're doing all this action up here, by the time this guy gets here, he doesn't get to play. And in fact, when this attack did go in, it was after St. Blaise had already been overrun by red. We actually went ahead and played another 5-minute turn just on the umpire table so they could get in and get one round of battle in. Of course, they did not win. But as you guys have pointed out, these fellows played what we call marching simulator. They did not necessarily play a huge role in the battle. But they did have time to get there. The problem is they hung out around Agni for a few turns, several turns in fact. And that's the real reason why they didn't get into action sooner. They could have come into the action sooner. They could have gone directly to St. Blaise. And so there were some options that were made. So it's not necessarily the designer or the umpire's fault that they didn't get a whole lot of action. They made choices that cost them time. But yeah, that is something that we're sensitive to when we run these scenarios. It's important to start units closer to the action. You can't start them off map. You have to start them closer to the action. But at the same time, you do want this sort of layered approach where there's an ebb and a flow to a battle. And the way to get that ebb and flow is to make sure that reinforcements are arriving from different quarters at slightly different times. You don't want everything to just arrive at one time. You don't want to fight a set piece battle necessarily, because then everybody just gives one order, which is attack, and it's more like a medieval scenario than a Napoleonic scenario. So we do want the maneuver, but yes, it is something that it's the one thing you have to be very careful about. Okay, lots and lots of comments coming through. We're at our time limit, but I'll try to cover some of these because these are important. Let's see here. Carter is partial to 15-minute turns. Most of the IKS games are 15-minute turn increments. Jan says, I prefer 15 minutes. I like the maneuvering. However, I think players should know more about the location of the enemy. Then, like the first 2 hours should be one turn setting up formations instead of running blindly into each other. Yeah, we do. We kind of fast forward things. Once the formations are set up, we fast forward the game to contact. But in yesterday's scenario, one of the challenges is red started in contact with blue. So we did make a couple big jumps at the beginning. We got to about 45 minutes of time before we had to slow down and do the 5-minute increments. Let's see here. Carter says, I think we should encourage players, especially in our bigger battles, to avoid what Justin calls a full court press. Marching Simulator has its virtues, especially if the player is making a demonstration attack or maneuver, and that's part of it too. I think I even have a meme for it. The path to peace is found along the map edge. Right there. There's our meme. So I think I even have one or two others. But we'll put it over here at Ogni, where one of the blue formations hung out for a while. Let's see, a couple more comments here. Jan says, would make them think about terrain and the battle as a whole and prevent having 300-meter cavalry charges and such stuff that makes no sense. Yeah, cavalry charges are usually like 100 meters or so, maybe 200. You're not making a charge from 1,000 meters, from a kilometer away or anything. And then Theo says, maybe leaders have a scout or two available, but limited in time to possible for scout to get lost and killed. We do assume that all formations have kind of a cloud of scouts around them. In bigger games, yes, the cavalry in particular, the hussars, make ideal scouts, especially in the K22 system, but probably also in all the other systems. In Otto's system, for example, in the systems that Carter uses, scouting isn't just encouraged, it's frankly mandatory. If you don't scout, you're blind. But that's what you have cavalry for. In K22, it is acceptable to say, I want to, send a staff officer or some scouts forward. We always assume you have some skirmishers out there. You're not necessarily going to ever be ambushed completely by surprise. You're going to kind of see around you, and we do take that into consideration when we issue reports. So, some lessons. One of the things that was suggested was that when we go between player time and umpire time, because this game really moved fast, it was moving like in 8-minute turns, which is one of the fastest turn cycles I've seen. And that's really just about as fast as you can possibly do it. One of the things that I'm trying to think who it was. I think it was Nick suggested that we have some kind of a token or something to represent when all the umpires are ready. Because I remember during the game, and you guys can see this on the live stream, which is posted to YouTube, of the full game. The full game is on there. I kept asking, are the umpires ready? Are we ready? And having a token or something that they flip over allows me to simply see that, and I don't have to keep asking, and then we just proceed without delay. We actually did that during Grand Gettysburg, and I can probably, if I go here, I can show you the little tokens, and here it is. Here's my token. and this token did exactly that thing. We had umpire time and we had player time, and the idea was we could indicate when we were ready. When we had all the orders in, we would flip the token, and it served exactly that purpose. Maybe it's time to bring that back. Let's see here. Jan says use the turn feature in Tabletop Simulator. The what? I didn't know there's a turn feature in here. If there is, nobody told me. But yes, that might also be a solution as well. Um, there was one or two other little lessons that I kind of learned from an umpire perspective. I think the big one, though, being having that high player to umpire ratio. We always want to maximize how many people get to play, that we kind of short staff ourselves in umpires, but we have to balance that with the quality of the experience, because the players get a longer wait time, which is a negative experience when there's too few umpires. And the umpires get kind of overworked and it becomes a stressful thing, and then people don't want to umpire. I really do think we need to move closer to a 1-to-1 player to umpire ratio. I think it helps. The biggest thing was we had a 2-to-1 umpire ratio, two players to one umpire. That worked pretty well, and I think we need to set that as a minimum, and we need to insist upon it that we have players step up. So if it's not your first or second game, maybe you try your hand assisting at the umpire table. It's not hard because you're basically relaying reports, and it's actually a heck of a lot of fun because you get to see what's going on and you get to see players having that, oh no, what do I do now? It's actually quite addicting to have that experience because you know what's going on, but you're watching them. It's kind of like watching a horror movie, right? And you're like, no, don't open the closet door. Oh, why did you do that? Why did you go in the basement? Who aren't you dumb? Why didn't you just leave? You know, and well, okay. And you get to see that, and that's pretty rewarding. Anyway, this is kind of all the time. I'm going to go ahead and read the last comment from Otto here. In all my games, all of the umpires should be in the same channel towards the end of the turn, and I just ask if everyone is ready and make sure I hear a yes from each person. It goes quite well. Yeah, that's what we were doing, but I think Nick's suggestion is another way to make it more efficient. And Jan said there's a turn feature. He's going to have to show me that when I talk to him later. All right. Well, everybody, I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank our guests, Achilles and Vindictus, for coming in here and giving their personal thoughts. I would have liked to have had more time for everyone to just kind of talk, but there was just a lot of information to get out there. This is a really cool battle, and I am looking forward to the next one. So, without further ado, all I can say is we will see you on the next adventure. Thanks, everyone. Catch you soon. Bye bye.